is what Bitcoiners have been talking about for years now, that the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve policies are basically creating unsustainable conditions. And, the Fed and the government have basically been floating the economy and markets since the coronavirus hit. That's why the stock market kept going down, even though we had one of the worst recessions we've ever had. But now it's time to get real. And, the Fed is going to start tightening because we are now seeing the fastest inflation in 4 decades. So,
meanwhile, somewhat disappointing job numbers this morning, right? Doesn't feel like the jobs number is going to change what the Fed's schedule, but it seems like a pretty tough spot. Understandably, investors are nervous.
There was a mixed reading on the jobs report. The number came in a little bit lighter than people were expecting, but the unemployment rate went down and there was some upward pressure on wages. And so people are saying it might be just a sign that, again, the labor market is so tight that employers are having trouble finding workers at the current wage levels.
So the long-term holders not picking up the slack to buy as the short-term investors back out of what's perceived as a risk-on asset. But I think within crypto, Bitcoin is kind of in some cases, the flight to quality. We've seen a little bit of a reversal of the downward trend in Bitcoin dominance. I'm just looking at, a handful of bellwethers against Bitcoin. Ether versus Bitcoin down in the past 2 days. Solana versus Bitcoin has been in trouble since December. AVAX versus Bitcoin down the past several days. Uniswap is a kind of an outlier in a way. That Uniswap is actually, sort of representing the DeFi category, has performed better than it was in December and the beginning of the year against Bitcoin. That is, but Christie, how can we kind of evaluate what's going on here between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies within the cryptocurrency sphere?
Well, it depends on who you are talking to. If you're talking to somebody who is very pro Bitcoin, but not to the exclusion of other coins. If you're not talking to an absolute Bitcoin maxi, this absolutely makes sense because what we're looking at is
talk to absolute Bitcoin maxi.
I mean, if you're a maxi and you think that anything except Bitcoin is total crap and means nothing and will go to zero and has no use, then this is an alarming chart. If you are able to sort of look beyond that and understand that Bitcoin does certain things exceedingly well, and that other types of blockchains do other things that are not in competition with Bitcoin rather well, then this is not a matter of comparing apples and oranges even. What you're looking at is a maturation of the space overall. And you're seeing Bitcoin, if you're just lumping all cryptocurrencies in one basket, Bitcoin is losing some of its dominance there. However, if you are looking at it as a space that has matured to the point where there are many different use cases for cryptocurrencies, stores of value versus smart contract capabilities, not that Bitcoin can't do smart contracts, folks, but that is not the primary use case. And when Ethereum was born in the first place, Vitalik was a Bitcoiner. He was into developing Bitcoin and he wanted to do things that Bitcoin was not at the time capable of doing. And so he went off and created his own thing that would do the things he wanted to do. And things have been growing on that. And in turn, Ethereum hasn't done all the things that people want to do with smart contracts. So they've gone off and they've done things on their own projects. And all of these are working together to create a strong, mature ecosystem. So this idea of Bitcoin losing and others winning and that there's some sort of competition between the two, I don't think is something we need to be focusing on. And I don't even know if that is a useful way of approaching it or a healthy way of approaching it. I think I think we can see the ecosystem as diverse enough to support lots of different projects that have different use cases.
Well, okay, so this seems like actually a good point to shift into. We've been looking back on 2021. Let's look ahead to 2022. Does the trend in Bitcoin dominance, the downward trend, continue? And does Bitcoin need another? I think I agree with everything you said, Christie, but I also feel like there's a need for a kind of a question. Does a kind of ossification narrative work well for Bitcoin? Does a Bitcoin that does very little, develops new capacities very slowly, very conservatively, is that going to be something that a growing number of users will respond to? Is that going to contribute to the strength and health of the network? What do you think? I mean, do we need another taproot in 2022? Does Bitcoin dominance move in the other direction? Any sort of look ahead you can offer here would be helpful.
Well, I think that saying that Bitcoin does very little is a kind of a minimalizing way of looking at Bitcoin. Creating a whole new banking system or alternative to the financial system as we know it on Earth is kind of a big deal. So I think that being able to build on a system that will create hard, sound money over the long term that has no downtime, and no glitches, that is a pretty major deal and a major accomplishment. I think that the new things that come after, what's next after Taproot, we don't know yet. They're all in the works. Maybe it will be better smart contract capabilities. Maybe it will be an improvement to the existing payment networks that we are already seeing with Lightning. We don't know yet. And now that Taproot has been
implemented, there is a risk, right? There's a risk that we're moving too slow. I mean, we've built,
of course,
something has been built.
That's why we have Ethereum in the first place, right? And that's why we have other layer one protocols in the works in the first place.
So meanwhile, I don't think the traditional banking system is in any danger of catching up quickly to whatever's happening in Bitcoin or Ethereum. But nonetheless, Jerome Powell and Lael Brainerd have confirmation hearings in the coming week. I believe Tuesday for Powell and Thursday for Brainerd. Brad, you have a thought? What should we be looking ahead to on those? And are these going to? Should we be looking for any inclination of perhaps a CBDC or some kind of a crypto-related questioning from the senators who will be conducting those hearings?
Well, I would imagine the bulk of these hearings are going to be focused on very traditional financial aspects, the monetary policy, supervision of traditional financial firms. But sure, there's a growing interest in members of Congress and this in what's happening in crypto, and people getting campaign donations, and
there's an oversight hearing coming on the environmental footprint of Bitcoin, I believe. Isn't that right? That's at least in the wind somewhere. Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of questions that are being raised by cryptocurrencies. Does it threaten financial stability? Could the stable coins or CBDCs steal deposits away from banks? And banks have friends in Congress, and banks have people who are not such great friends in Congress. Elizabeth Warren is not such a huge fan of the big banks. So, and that could be an interesting one for Lael Brainerd also.
Yeah. Lael Brainerd, who's had a lot to say about central bank digital currencies in the past.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Well, so in the next Fed meeting, I think is coming up January 25-ish, 26. Anything to look forward to there, or where should we be looking toward for the markets coming ahead for the next week or beyond through the rest of the month of January?
As far as the Fed goes, it's still a couple of weeks away, and the Fed is so careful and good at leaking its narratives out into the market through its
not leaking rather
channels. Yeah. Well, they when they want to manage the market, they do that with their own dark arts, and that's probably, the message is out there that they're going full hawk here, at least for the time being. If the stock market collapses, all bets are off, because that's really, they're worried about self-fulfilling prophecies. But Bitcoin's chart, we're just doing separate technical analysis on Bitcoin's chart, and it's not looking good. My colleague, again, Dominic, was looking at some of the charts, and we could be looking at 38,000. We're pretty close here. We're at 41 now, and after that, there's not a whole lot of levels of in between there. And like 28,000. So it could get ugly really fast.
Or the question of the floor is really the salient question
here.
And we got to be asking it, right? How far down could it go? We heard from an analyst yesterday talking about $10,000 Bitcoin and how Bitcoin mining companies would weather that. Actually, Christie, that's a good segue. I want to just come back to that question of what happened in Kazakhstan this week and kind of where hash rate is going from here. We saw it set a record high in the first couple of days of the year. And kind of as I think we've seen the signals of publicly traded mining companies, announcing investments in capital infrastructure. So we're seeing new mining operations coming online. Does that trend continue? Where do you think the sort of mining industry is looking at sort of for the week? And I mean, let's not talk about that on a week scale. Let's the months ahead for Bitcoin mining.
And I think that's important to look at is the trend that was happening before what happened in Kazakhstan. What we were seeing was a steady upward growth. And there's been a lot of investment in the mining space from outside capital coming in. We're looking at shares of mining companies going up. And a lot of this, you have to understand that miners have been ordering new material, new rigs, new infrastructure for the last few months. And it's all gradually coming online now. And that is where that upward trend is coming from. And you're also seeing a lot of the projections that mining companies have been making since through the end of the year for this year. They were calling for doubling the hash rate altogether over the next 6 to 8 months. And there's no reason to think that isn't going to happen, Kazakhstan notwithstanding. That was a blip. That is a blip. And if you were to compare, say, the difficulty adjustment. Now, the difficulty adjusts when there is less computational or more computational powering the network.
We have an adjustment coming up this weekend, right?
In 12 hours.
The next one.
Yeah, in 12 hours.
Right.
And even though we lost a significant part of the hash rate in Kazakhstan, we're still adjusting upward. It might not be by much, but we're going to be adjusting upward by something like 1%-ish in the next 12 hours. Yeah. So it wasn't really enough to cause the network to slow down at all. In fact, the network has been performing and mining blocks at a rate that exceeds the 10-minute target of finding a block. And keep in mind, when China started dropping offline, the downward adjustment went from 23.5 trillion down to 20.5 trillion. Like it went down a significant amount. We're going up. Right. So in the grand scheme,
and I mean, I guess if you sort of look back to May 2021, that was a really salient moment for Bitcoin, right? I mean, the largest jurisdiction for mining in the world went offline precipitously, and we didn't really see the network. We didn't really see the network miss a beat.
It did not. So I guess the network. No, not. It's not even like really miss. It did not miss a beat.
Right. Yeah.
It tick-tocked along. Yeah. And it lost half its hash rate, and it went down. The difficulty went down by 50% pretty much. And it's been on a steady upward climb. And we're maintaining that upward climb.
Right. And these are the long-term investments. In many ways, miners are kind of, I think, symbolic of the kind of long-term buy and hold, even though obviously miners do have to sell some of the Bitcoin they mine. I think, when you see somebody making that kind of long-term investment and that investment increasing, that's got to be a sort of a beyond the week-to-week or month-to-month trend, a long-term positive direction.
And you're also going to see miners who are less economically efficient. They will be dropping offline as well. And yet we're still going up. And there's a great op-ed piece that CoinDesk Chief Content Officer Michael Casey put out yesterday. Kazakh mining slide offers lessons for U.S. lawmakers. All of that comes full circle with our regulation talk earlier. So there are some really good opportunities for mining to increase over the next few months.
Well, Christie Harkin in Toronto, Brad Keoun in Texas, thank you both for being here. What a sort of challenging start to the year, but good to have a couple of folks like you here to break it down for us.
Great fun.
Thanks, Keoun.
Thanks a lot, Galen.
That was our CoinDesk Weekend Review panel with Managing Editor of Technology, Christie Harkin, and Managing Editor of Markets, Brad Keoun. And that's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm Galen Moore. All About Bitcoin returns on Monday at 3 p.m., and so does Christine Lee. It's been a pleasure filling in for her this week. And you can also catch First Mover at 9 a.m. Monday, New York. Your first look at the day's global crypto news headlines. You're watching CoinDesk TV.